The 2022 NFL Draft is in the books, and in this episode, we're going to be grading each team in the AFC East to talk about how they've done setting their teams up in 2023 and beyond with their choices this past weekend. I'm Jake with Sports Around the Bar, and these are my grades from the 2022 Draft. So, without further ado, let's grab a drink and get right into it. Starting in the first round for the Buffalo Bills, let's start at pick 23, which they traded an extra fourth-round pick to move up a couple spots with the Baltimore Ravens to select Kaiir Elam, cornerback out of Florida. I give this grade an A-. Kaiir Elam is one of the higher-rated corners on my board. I saw him definitely as a first-round talent, right around the 20 area that he actually wound up going. So I see good value here for Buffalo. And what's more, they've got a quality guy that they're going to be able to slot in at that second corner spot opposite of Tre'Davious White. They've been looking for that guy for years now, and I think they finally have their answer with a tough press man corner in Kaiir Elam. Now, I'm not as crazy about them having to give up the fourth-round pick on top of it. If they had just been able to sit still and pick Kaiir Elam at this spot, I probably would have given them an A or even an A+ with the value they got out of it. But unfortunately, they did have to make that move. They gave up a little bit extra draft capital, and they had to give up another career, even if it's a fourth-round pick, just to go out and make sure they got their guy. I think Elam's worth it, but it does drive the grade down just a little bit for me. Moving on to pick number 2 for the Bills. At 63, they take James Cook, the running back out of Georgia. He's realistically probably a third down back. I think he's the best scat back in this class, and a guy that I had, I think, number 3 in my rankings. Pretty good quality player here, but I think he's going to be much more of a complementary back to guys like Zach Moss and Devin Singletary that are already in the backfield for Buffalo. I like this pick. It's a bit of a luxury pick, but when you're a team as good as Buffalo, you're allowed to take gambles on some of the less valuable positions earlier to try to see if you can get a special player. James Cook probably doesn't have quite the same moxie that his brother does in Dalvin Cook, but you're still getting, I think, a pretty good receiving back that's going to come in and make a difference, maybe pick up a couple of those tougher third downs for you. So I give this grade a B. I think it's solid, if not necessarily the best choice they could have made. They could have gone other directions, but I do like the fact that they are trying to invest on this in this running back's backfield. Now, with their third-round picks where things start to go sour a little bit for the Buffalo Bills, they took Terrell Bernard, linebacker out of Baylor. I give this pick a D+, and the reason I do that is because when you consider some of the other linebackers on the board that probably had more talent going into this and were certainly much better rated, especially on a lot of people's draft boards, I see it as a bit of a reach going out and get a guy like Bernard because they could have had Leo Chenal here. They could have had Channing Tindall. They had their options at a bunch of guys that probably would have fit better in this position for the Bills. On top of that, even though Bernard has good speed, he almost profiles as more of a safety at the next level just because of his size and because he's already not a solid tackler. When you get to the NFL, you can't be missing 15% of your tackles like you did in college. That number's only going to go up as you face better athletes week in and week out. This, to me, not a great pick for the Bills. I think when you're talking about the value they could have had at other spots, or even in the linebacker position, they could have gone a bunch of different directions. It's not a total loss because of his athleticism. There is a chance that he can develop into a quality starter and maybe be better than those guys I named off. But for right now, I got to give this a D+, because, again, there were better options both in this position and on the board as a whole. They still took Terrell Bernard, so it's a D+ for me. As we keep going down the list here, at number 148, the Bills take Khalil Shakir, wide receiver out of Boise State. I see this as a C+. I think he's probably going to be a dynamic slot receiver in the NFL, and even though there is becoming more and more of a role for that, it still is a bit of a luxury. This is exactly where you want to take him, though, when you talk about spending your fifth-round picks. Getting a guy like Shakir, even though his size is a bit of an issue, he's probably never going to be able to play outside because of his height. The burst and the speed that he has should set things up to have him be an effective slot player in the NFL level at least. I can see him as a bit of a Cole Beasley replacement down the road where he develops into the guy that you want to have out there, especially on third downs where he's going to be running a bunch of short routes, getting open in short space, and making things happen. But he does have some concerns with some concentration drops, with some drops on some easy passes. So, again, C+ here. I think the Bills did okay and got good value with him, especially in the 5th round. But still, we're not talking about a world beater here. I don't think they absolutely knocked this pick out of the park, but it's a good pick still, and I don't think C+, I think C+ is a good job of reflecting that. Next, the last grade you're going to see here for the Buffalo Bills at 180 is Matt Ariza, the punter out of San Diego State. I give this an A+. The Bills went out and got a record-holding punter for both average as well as kicks inside the 20. He broke NCAA records. I think getting him in the 6th round when other punters have gone off the board higher than him, this is the value you want to be taking a kicker and punter at. I know a lot of people subscribe to the thought of, well, you don't need to take a kicker. You can just get an undrafted free agent. But if you see a guy with some talent and you have the ability to secure a position like that for 10, 15 years down the road, why not blow a pick that is probably going to go on a guy that won't make the roster anyway? So I think there's great value here. I give this an A+ because they got such a talented punter and they didn't have to overinvest to get it. Bring in Matt Ariza out of San Diego State. Great move for the Buffalo Bills. Now, they had a couple more picks here, and I'm going to read them off, but like you'll see with a lot of my late-round draft picks, when you get to this point in the draft, this is where you want to be taking risks and just taking shots at guys. So it wouldn't be fair to me to kind of throw out a bunch of grades and weight them the same as everybody else. At this point, these are kind of incomplete grades where, hey, these are the kind of risks that you want to take. Christian Benford, cornerback out of Villanova, Luke Tentula, offensive tackle out of Virginia Tech, and Balin Spector, linebacker out of Clemson. All three of those guys are rolls of the dice that the Bills are taking to see if they're going to wind up making the roster. If these guys don't ever wind up playing a down of football for the Buffalo Bills, you can't be upset that they took them at picks 185 and later. So at the very least, we're going to round out this draft class and talk about the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to give them a B+. I think they did a great job when we're talking about bringing in guys like Kyer Elam on a relatively cheap trade to make sure they got him. They got good value out of James Cook. Terrell Bernard is not the best pick in my opinion, but it's a late 3rd round pick and one that I think you can get away with when you're talking about how well these other picks have worked out. Khalil Shakir added value in the 5th round, and then they got one of the better punting prospects for a 6th round pick. The Bills knocked this draft out of the park. Next, let's talk about the Dolphins, which is a team that's really hard to grade because they only had a 3rd round pick as their highest and only had 4 picks total in this draft. But it started at pick 102 for them with Channing Tindall, linebacker out of Georgia. A very physically talented linebacker here with Channing Tindall, a guy who ran a 4.47. He has all the physical ability that you look for when it comes to the athletic profile, so he moves really well. Interesting guy, but there's a couple concerns you have here. Number one being the fact that he really couldn't lock down a starting role at Georgia. Now, I know you're going to say, oh, well, that's not really that big of a surprise when you got guys like Nakobe Dean there, you got guys like Quay Walker in front of him, but still, you would like to see him be utilized there a little bit more if you're going to spend a 3rd round pick on him. I think he's a good player, but I don't necessarily know if he's going to be a world beater when we're talking about him not even being able to win a job in college versus everywhere else. So you can kind of forgive it because it's Georgia. It's still kind of a red flag in my opinion. On top of that, I don't think his instincts are very good. I think he's one of those guys that even though he has all of the athletic ability and he can close on guys, a lot of times he puts himself in the wrong spot, and that's going to lead to problems at the next level. The good thing is, a lot of times those can be coached out of people. Usually, when you're talking about instinct, it's something that a guy, even if it can't be totally reversed, you can get better with good coaching. Channing Tindall, to me, I'm going to give this grade a B-. We're talking about how Miami did, just for the simple fact that they are getting such an athletic guy this late in the draft. Outside the top 100, getting a guy with this kind of pedigree is still a pretty big pickup. Now, with their 4th round pick, which is the last one with the grade, the Miami Dolphins took Eric Ezukanma, wide receiver out of Texas Tech. I hope I said that right. I think I might have butchered it. He might have a little bit of value in the NFL as a yards after catch guy with his athletic ability and the way he's able to break tackles, but I would have liked to see him drop a little bit farther. Normally, obviously, you look at the Dolphins and you say, well, they only had 2 7th round picks, so if they like the guy, they kind of had to take him in the 4th round if they expected to get him. Still, there were other guys, I think, in the 4th round that probably would have been better risks to take. I'm going to give this grade a C. We're talking about bringing in a guy like Ezukanma at pick 125. So somewhere around average. Not a terrible pick for the Dolphins, not the best pick in the world. Moving on to the next couple picks, they didn't pick again until the 7th round, where they had 2 picks, one at 224, one at 247. They took Cameron Good, an edge defender out of Cal, and they took Skylar Thompson, a quarterback out of Kansas State. Again, another couple guys that are fringe players that if they never make the roster, it wouldn't be right of me to hold it against them by giving them good grades or bad grades for these picks. So for now, we're going to give those incomplete grades and round out the Dolphins with a C+ grade. Not really a whole lot of capital here to make things happen. I think they did all right, considering they only had a couple picks inside the top 130, but they didn't exactly hit it out of the park either. That's why I'm giving them slightly above average with this C+ grade. They did okay. They got guys that have a little bit of upside, but they didn't land a guy that you're saying, man, how did he fall this far? Or what crazy value they got out of here? I'd say they got average return for the picks that they wound up having. And hopefully for Dolphins fans, they're going to have more picks next year that they're able to kind of flesh out the rest of this roster and make a bigger impact in the draft. Next, and we've got significantly more to talk about here, are the New England Patriots. Starting off at pick 29, they took Cole Strange after trading down with the Chiefs, offensive guard out of Chattanooga. Look, this has just got to be an F. Even though I like Strange as a prospect, he is on the older side coming out of college, and on top of that, he has some holes in his game where, yes, we saw him perform at a pretty high level at Chattanooga, but that's beating up on bad competition. To scoop a guy like this at number 29, most teams valued him somewhere around a third or a fourth round pick from what I've been hearing. So the reach here is just absolutely insane. I feel like this is the Patriots thinking they're smarter than everybody else when it comes to drafting, and historically they've hit on a lot of these guys. But if you're going to take a guy like Cole Strange, why not trade down again? Why not make a move later or take another position and grab Cole Strange with either the second, the third, or maybe even the fourth round pick that you had at 121 if you knew all these other teams weren't going to take him? I think they reached on him. I think this is a little bit of the Patriots feeling like they're smarter than everybody else in the room, and who knows? Maybe when it's all said and done, they will be, and they'll be looking like geniuses for taking him in the first round. But for now, I have to give this grade an F. I mean, when you're talking about reaching more than 100 picks to go out and get a guard specifically in the first round, it's just not that good of a move for me, and one that the Patriots have a lot. If he's going to have to play amazing right out of the gate if he's going to live up to this first-round pick. After that, at 50, they took Tyquan Thornton, wide receiver out of Baylor. This is another kind of reach from the Patriots when you consider guys like Alec Pierce and George Pickens still on the clock. This is the Patriots chasing speed, and when you look at their wide receiving core, you could say, yes, they really could use the deep threat. Still, when you're in that situation, you don't want to find yourself taking a guy because your team needs him if that value isn't there on the board. And I think that's what they've done here with Tyquan Thornton. There were a lot better wide receivers, at least from a pedigree and a production standpoint, on this board, whether it's George Pickens or whether it's Alec Pierce. Those are two names that specifically could have come off much earlier at this spot and had been much better value than reaching out a guy like Tyquan Thornton. Why not trade out of this pick? Why not try to scoop him later unless they had some inside tip that another team was just super high on him and going to take him somewhere in this range? But I haven't heard any team come out and say, oh, we needed to get Tyquan Thornton and we were disappointed not to get him. Obviously, they probably won't go out and wear that on their sleeves, but still, this is just too much of a reach. Another F for me. Again, there is a chance he winds up being a decent player in the NFL level, but with where he was taken, the value simply is not there with this pick. Moving forward, let's talk about Marcus Jones, cornerback out of Houston, taken at number 85 for the Patriots. He's another guy that they needed cornerback help, obviously, with J.C. Jackson departing this offseason. They're needing to refresh the position. But getting a 5'8 corner, he's probably not big enough to play on the outside. He's probably going to have to play in the slot, most likely, when you're talking about him matching up with some of these receivers that are 6'3", 6'4", and 50 pounds heavier than him. Marcus Jones has a little bit of talent and showed some production off at Houston, but just the translation of his skills and his size at the next level, I just don't know that it's going to happen. And again, I'll give this one a D because I can't see him being much more of a quality player probably than someone like Tyquan Thornton that came off the board ahead of him. It's a risk that you didn't need to take with some of the other guys on the board. Even at 85, you're really gambling on his athletic ability, just outweighing the negatives of his height, and I can't really give them a good grade for that. At 121, the Patriots take Jack Jones in the fourth round, cornerback out of Arizona State. This is going to be another F for me. I know I'm really going hard on the Patriots here, but Jack Jones is 5'11", 170, already another undersized guy, even though he is bigger than Marcus Jones. He's already struggled facing a lot of athletic receivers in college, and now on top of that, throw that he's had criminal charges for commercial burglary. You're looking at a guy that's not only got attitude problems, but also lacks the physical profile you want to look at in the NFL level. Scooping him here, again, you're really just throwing darts against the board, hoping one of these guys can overcome a bunch of negatives and become a good player for you. I know the Patriots have found ways to find players, especially late-round players, and develop them, but still, when you're talking about this kind of gap of physicality, there have been a lot of washouts the Patriots have had too, and a lot of times they've made their money and they've made their best decisions by having a bunch of picks and being able to weed out the ones that don't work. Don't like this Jack Jones pick as well. I think they could have gone in another direction. He's a guy that, again, a lot of things stacked up against him to be a successful corner in the NFL, but at least he's closer to that 6-foot number that you really want to see your cornerbacks at least if they're going to match up with guys on the outside. Moving on to some things that I actually like from them. Let's talk about Pierre Strong out of South Dakota State, running back. I'm going to give this one a B-. He's very likely going to be a replacement for James White with his running style. Very solid pick here for them. Bailey Zappi, a quarterback out of Western Kentucky. I'm going to give this one a B+. With this kind of addition, you've now brought in a cheap backup for years to come that if push comes to shove and something happens to Mac Jones, is going to play a very similar style. Very accurate, very good in short yardage, kind of slant or rhythm passing plays. I like Bailey Zappi here to fit this kind of offensive scheme because you have two quarterbacks that don't exactly have the biggest arms in the world, but maximize the ability to throw in stride and hit guys on the move. Zappi fits very well with what the Patriots already do with a guy like Mac Jones. Finally, the last grade I have here, I have Kevin Harris, running back out of South Carolina. I'm going to give this one a C. And at 183, I think, again, another complementary back to what they already have in Pierre Strong a couple rounds earlier. He's more of a power back to go with Pierre Strong's lighter, kind of, I don't want to call him third down, but much more of a scat back style play. I think Kevin Harris is another good running back that you want to take here. Perfect position for that. I'm going to give it an average pick because I'm not really sure that he's a special player. But when you get to the 6th round, this is where he's a good dart to throw, and I like the fact that they brought in a complementary piece so that they can maximize their running potential and just kind of mix up the type of styles that they do. After that, a couple guys that we're going to give incomplete grades to. Sam Roberts, defensive tackle out of Northwest Missouri State. Chasen Hines, offensive guard out of LSU. Andrew Stuber, offensive guard out of Michigan. The only thing I want to talk about with those guards, if they felt so good about Cole Strange, perhaps they feel like he's going to play tackle at the next level, but if they felt that good about him, why were they taking 2 more guards in the bottom end of the draft? Just a little strange. Maybe that's where their value was. Maybe that's where those guys fell on the board and they said, hey, we're getting good value for the pick number. But it's just a weird investment in the offensive line. Not in the fact that they took so many offensive linemen, but the fact that they took so many guards. Just a little strange when you took a guard in the 1st round already. Now, when it comes to their overall grade, there's nothing I can do besides give the Patriots an F. You look at how their top few picks panned out. When number 1 and number 2 are an F, you can pretty much bank on that being an F unless you hit some supreme value later on, and I didn't really feel like they did that. Pretty much you go through the top of the 4th round until you get to 127. Didn't really like any of these picks. So, to me, this is probably the worst draft, if not one of the worst drafts that we saw this weekend, unfortunately. Finally, let's round it out with the New York Jets. They had a lot of picks in the first day. Let's start with number 4, Ahmad Sauce Gardner, cornerback out of Cincinnati, going early without them having to trade up. The fact that this guy fell to them on the board, I think is fantastic for them. I think he's the best corner in this draft. I think Derek Stingley's very close, but I think they also do a little bit different things. The fact that they're getting a tough pressed man corner to go with Robert Saleh's aggressive defense, I think is fantastic for them. Again, number 1 corner on my board. I had him at number 4 on my entire big board, so the fact that he comes off the board at number 4 is great value. This is an A+ for me. No argument here. I think they did a great job not overthinking things and getting a guy that's going to help their biggest position of need, cornerback, going forward here. At number 10, they took Garrett Wilson, wide receiver out of Ohio State. This I'm going to give an A- to, just for the simple fact that, again, he wasn't the first receiver off the board. I think everybody knew that the Jets needed wide receiver help. And while I do like Garrett Wilson's game, I do kind of wonder if he's going to actually live up to the billing of a number 1 wide receiver that you should be getting when you spend the 10th overall pick on a wide receiver. Regardless, they needed somebody to play opposite of Corey Davis and take some of the outside pressure off of him and some of the attention off of him if they're going to get their money's worth out of him. I like the pick. I'll give this one an A-. I think they got good value here, but I do wonder if they just drafted another high-end number 2 wide receiver in Garrett Wilson, so that's why I can't go any higher than an A-. Time will tell. Maybe his route running ability turns him into a Keenan Allen-style player where he's able to just generate so much space because of his sharp route running that he is ultimately a number 1 wide receiver. But still, I think there's some doubt there, which is why I won't go higher than an A-. Now, at 26, they traded up with Tennessee to get Jermaine Johnson, and they didn't really give up a whole lot to make that happen. Honestly, they only gave up one pick and then traded back in a couple rounds, about 20 spots with Tennessee, to move back up into the first round and get what a lot of people thought was a top 10 edge rusher. So Jermaine Johnson falling this far in the draft, to me, I always saw him somewhere around 1920, which is about where I had him on my big board. I see him as more of a strong run defender that's going to also impact the passing game, but maybe not quite as much as he's going to help shore up that edge of the line. I like him as an edge defender. I think he's going to be a very solid player. If not, he may never lead the league in sacks, but what he will be is another 8, 9, 10 sack a year guy that also is very sure against the run and very physical as well. That's going to give you solid downs, whether it's first down, third down, you can have him out there whenever. And the fact that they got him for as little as they wound up having to give up to get back into the first round, I think is absolute masterclass out of the Jets. I'm going to call this one an A. I really like this pick. I really like this move. I think their entire first round just knocked it out of the park. Now let's move on and talk about the second round. At 36, the Jets take Breece Hall, running back out of Iowa State. This is a B+ for me. I thought there were two special backs in this class, Kenny Walker, Breece Hall. I had Kenny Walker a little bit higher than him, but since the Jets just took Michael Carter last year, I really see Breece Hall and the more power style running he's going to bring over a guy like Kenny Walker, complementing Michael Carter in that backfield. So getting a special running back here, it's a B+ for me. I think they did a great job of really getting a special player, because a lot of people say, oh, running backs don't have value, they shouldn't go this high in the draft. But I think when you have the chance to get a special running back, you should just take it. I think they got solid value at the top end of the second round, bringing in in my opinion, one of these special backs in this class. Going all the way down to 101 in the third round, they took Jeremy Ruckert, a guy I'm not as high on. I see him as more of a blocking tight end at the next level. I give this pick a D+, because when you're in the third round, you probably need to be chasing higher end talent out of a tight end than just a blocker that maybe has a little bit of catching ability. We'll see what happens with him. I think he still needs to develop as an actual receiver, and I just don't see him making that much of an impact outside of blocking in the NFL level. So I'm not crazy about this pick. I'm going to give it a D+, because he still has some value. He's still going to give the team blocking, but you can get a guy like that in the 5th and 6th round, no problem. I don't really see this as a great pick for them. After that, we'll talk about Max Mitchell, offensive tackle out of Louisiana. This, to me, another good tackle that they got good value on with him falling this late. I'm going to give it a B+. They're shoring up the offensive line. They're taking guys to come in and compete if they need to. While I don't see Max Mitchell as a starter day one, I do see him as a guy that maybe you get to year 2, year 3, year 4, and they say, well, we've seen him in practice. We have confidence that he's able to step up and join this young offensive line that seems like it's getting better and better every year as the Jets continue to invest in it. And finally, all their picks are actually going to get grades with their last pick at 117. Michael Clemens, edge rusher out of Texas A&M. I'm going to give this pick a D-. Even though it's a 4th-round pick, he is one of the oldest draft prospects in this class, and realistically, I don't think he's going to have a good enough burst to really rush the passer. He's a guy that's probably going to wind up being more of an early down player, that you play him on 1st or 2nd down if you need to really stuff the run. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think you want to have that guy out there that's not going to make too much of an impact on the pass rush, just because teams are throwing more and more these days. I really see him as much more of a run-stuffing end that, if you needed to, could probably shift inside a little bit. He's just not really a good enough talent at 117 here. I'm going to give this a D-. I really don't see a whole lot of value here, except for maybe when you get into those 2nd and 3rd and shorts and you just need to play like the jumbo packages. It's a little rich for a guy like that, but still, when you're getting this late in the draft, this is starting to get to the point where it's okay to start taking some shots. There were still better guys on the board at this point, but when it comes to Michael Clemens, it's a risk that I don't think the Jets necessarily needed to take, but one that's not going to kill their grade at all for me when you talk about how late it is. So when it comes to their overall grade, I don't think there's any way you can give the Jets anything but an A+. I mean, when you get 3 guys that you grade that highly in the 1st round, there's so much value that they extracted out of their top picks that they did. I have to give them an A+. That's all I can say. They got so much value early that hopefully this is going to be the catalyst that helps turn this roster around and gets them back on the track to get into the playoffs here coming, maybe not whether it's this year, whether it's next year. Hopefully this is what rights the ship for the Jets. All right, guys, that's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments below, what did you think of the drafts here at the AFC East? What did you think of my grades? What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Let me know all of that. I read each and every one of the comments because I love I love hearing people tell me I'm wrong and being able to back up what I think. So let me know all that down below. What you saw, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. It means so much to us, and it tells YouTube that you liked what you saw here and other people might like it too. We appreciate everybody who supports us in that way. It means so much, and it helps us grow. So thank you for doing that. We will see you guys next time to talk about the AFC North. So for now, I've been Jake with Sports Around the Bar, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.